teacher workshops. We do the basic workshops. We have one on June 3rd, and it's always a great workshop to bring guests to, as well as any of our workshops, as well as the somatic respiratory integration workshops with Stephanie. Those are exercises that are a key part to your care. If you've never participated in SRI, you're really missing a part of your progress, as well as these are the intermediate advanced wellness workshops. So, inflammation, this is the cover of Time a few years back, the secret color. Surprising link between inflammation and heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases. Inflammation is now considered to be a central part of all chronic conditions, including aging. Okay? I want you to think of most of your efforts in terms of improving your well-being, extending your quality of life, preventing conditions, having more joy, as things of wanting to reduce inflammation in your body. There's lots of different ways to do it. When I talk about the inflammatory process, as well as the things that improve, you want to avoid, things you want to improve. First of all, inflammation defined. A lot of times people think of inflammation, they think, okay, there's an area of red on my body, okay, or that's swollen, or I have a fever. And that is part of the inflammatory process. That's acute inflammation. So inflammation in the short term will be redness or swelling, at a paper cut, or fever, a person with infection. Normally it's really a healthy response. It strengthens your immune system where your body needs it most to kill off microscopic invaders. It is a positive thing. In fact, in my education, we always joked about the fact that people are always trying to bring down inflammation, like, oh, if their arm was inflamed or something, because you're actually doing something that, you know, you're hurting the healing process. You know, if there's a swollen ankle or something, like, that's your body's way of telling you to stay off that ankle. It's your body's own, you know, splint that's putting there, and it's its own white blood cells that are going in to protect the area. So there's a place where acute inflammation is very important in the healing process, and efforts to bring down inflammation can be counter to the healing process. So not something you want to generally do. I'm talking about acute inflammation versus letting your body have that as part of what it needs to do to heal. However, there's a different thing, which is systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation is, just think of the term, when your whole system is inflamed. So our immune systems respond to injury, irritation, or infection with inflammation, but then chronic systemic inflammation involves blood vessels, various tissues, and systems throughout the body, and the longer inflammation lasts, the more damage it can do to your body. Okay, so separate those two different things in your mind. Inflammation markers that you should have checked that very rarely get checked when you go to a typical medical doctor's visit are C-reactive protein, okay, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is also TNFA. Those different things are often about a $50 test you can do when you do other blood tests, but they don't do it routinely, but it's something that you can request, and you should request when you're having other tests done, okay? When they test your cholesterol levels, they can check it at the same time, but they just don't generally do it, okay? But it's far more important, it's actually a far better indicator than cholesterol in terms of health and well-being. Your body's levels of inflammation will tell you a lot more about where your health is going than your cholesterol levels. Much more important. So researchers have determined by blocking the inflammatory response associated with obesity, they can prevent the development of insulin resistance in diabetes in obese animals. Dr. Nicholas Periconi, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but we'll go with that, considers inflammation the single most powerful cause of the signs of aging. The single most powerful cause. Researchers are linking inflammation to an even wider array of chronic illnesses. Newsweek recently covered that, and they said suddenly medical puzzles seem to be fitting together, such as why hypertension puts patients at increased risk for Alzheimer's, or why rheumatoid arthritis sufferers have higher rates of sudden cardiac death. Is because inflammation is affecting all of these different conditions. So it can be thought as the root cause or the silent killer. It's an underlying thing that people haven't paid attention to. So they're connected on the same fundamental level. So inflammation, when you think of systemic inflammation, I want you to relate it to aging, skin cancer, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, macular degeneration, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, arthritis. I have Alzheimer's on there twice? No. Alzheimer's, arthritis, colon cancers. It can triple your risk of colon cancer, hay fever, depression, bone loss and osteoporosis. A lot of times people are trying to add in calcium and other magnesium and other things that are factors in osteoporosis, but they don't know they have so much inflammation that they have to bring that down because they can put in all the calcium they want. Hay fever, depression, bone loss, kids' cognitive impairment, vision, blood pressure. Is that a lot of things? Okay, so audience participant, what I want you to do is, not if you have one of these things now, but if one of these things is a health concern to you or your family, raise your hand. Okay? Now you have a concern that maybe people in your family, this is no, keep your hands up. Don't just do this and hide them. Okay, keep your hand up. Or if it's in your genetic line, like your father or grandfather had these things, you were concerned about that. Okay, so understand this affects a lot of people's health and well-being. It's not something to be ignored. Now, how does it relate to these different areas? So, inflammation or inflammaging, okay, it's a cause and effect of illness and the disease of aging. So, it can affect your brain, and then that shows up in Alzheimer's and depression. And some people, it can be more affected the heart, you can see it in atherosclerosis or stroke. If it affects the person's immune system, you see it more in cancer or chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia. If it's more affecting the body, you see in diabetes or metabolic syndrome. If it's relative to bone, we'll see in osteoarthritis or osteoporosis. Osteoarthritis, it very much affects inflammation. Affects sex, or functional impotence, skin, and wrinkles and cellulite, metabolism, and diabetes, metabolic syndrome. So understand, this is a whole range of different areas. Okay, so we're starting to go through the different things that can be related or causative to inflammation. First one and foremost, why I'm covering it first, spinal subluxation. I will tell you in no uncertain terms, your nervous system is a huge factor in inflammation in your body. Let's go through a little bit why. First of all, when your nervous system doesn't recover from stresses, physically, chemically, or emotionally, okay, it can be any of those things. We're talking about taking care of your spine. Understand, I am never talking about your back. Yes, that's part of it, but that's the smallest part that I'm concerned about. If you have subluxation to your spine, I'm really concerned about your whole health and well-being, particularly because of inflammation. When your body doesn't recover from stresses physically, chemically, or emotionally, one of the things that happens as there's nerve pressure, or much more importantly, changes in the spinal cord. Actually, most often when we're adjusting you, we're much more focused less on the nerves coming out in between the vertebrae, though that's part of it, but those are generally 90% of the time secondary to changes in your spinal cord. When your spinal cord changes its position, it flexes forward or bends to one side or the other, that creates extra cortisol in your body. Besides the nerve pressure, it also creates fight or flight syndrome. Fight or flight response, you need more adrenaline, more cortisol, your body's living in a fear state, and it creates as if there's life-threatening things going on. Okay? And that fight or flight state, one of the things a practice member, a person who just started with us, who's a physical therapist in the area, she just started care with us because nothing else was working, and she'd been having all these problems. About her third visit, she said to us, she came extremely delighted, but she said literally, I don't feel like I have mushroom head anymore. And I said, well, what did mushroom head mean? And I never really heard of that. And I said, well, what does mushroom head feel like? And she said, well, I felt like my head was like this big mushroom. I felt like my head was all the way out here. Okay? What is that describing?